because I've heard both of you guys' experience about how you both felt about the film, what led up to the project, the one thing that I wanted to share with you both about that I have picked up on, and it's been kind of delved into from with everyone else you've spoken with here, but I was really curious about how, because the film has been released, because this movie, I didn't realize until later on, I figured out with the conversation you both had that this movie was shot a number of years ago, prior to the major climate change with regards to Asian representation and among other things as well too. So you guys were actually at a pretty much at a point where you are on the cusp of that change being made here for Asians, actors and producers and writers and so on. But I was actually really curious now to see, because of the film's release, how both of you have felt that you may have noticed about how people have perceived the film, and then as a result of that, has that changed in a lot of ways for the better in terms of having more opportunities being presented to you because of the film's reception and how people have perceived the movie and getting a different perspective from the characters you played in the movie. So whoever wants to start with that, feel free to go.
Let's see. So I guess just to clarify, you're asking because our film is being released on VOD now,
right?
After Asian American films have had significant successes in the industry, such as Shang-Chi and Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Right.
How the reception seems to have been. For us, for
so have you felt the impact of people's response to the film since it has been released up to this point? And I'm curious to see what your perspective has changed as a result of that release here for you both.
Yeah, I would say it seems it's been interesting because on the one hand, I'm sure everybody is aware of all of the anti-Asian sentiments that have been expressed through these past few years, unfortunately, and so it's obviously had a negative impact on our community. And to be able to have this film come out during AAPI Heritage Month, it's kind of this conglomeration of celebration for Asians and Asian Americans in the US. I feel like it's, if anything, it's helped elevate the response to it, which of course we appreciate, but it's also just nice to be a part of something that we can celebrate as a community, when there's so much negativity, to have these these positive representations of Asians and Asian Americans in media. So I think in that respect, just like the timing of it has been really fortunate, and I'm grateful for that.
Okay, and what about for you? Did you have any difference in how you felt the reception of the movie since it's been released? Have you noticed a big change for yourself directly about what the response is to the film and how you feel like is somewhat may have changed the trajectory about the possible opportunities that may come from the reception of the movie?
I think it's not very direct, like because of the movie, a book, another thing, not like that. But I feel the general how I was perceived because after the movie is released, I think so far is pretty positive. I think a lot of friends who works in the industry has already seen the movie when it was first premiered in the film festival, and it was already I think it's a good thing, and I felt that it was a positive feedback. And after it released, it goes to wider audiences. Now, like for friends who are not working in the industry are able to see it, and a lot of them have seen them. And I guess they get a sense of what I've been busy with. Yeah, so that there is a change there. And I think Amy mentioned this before, and I think it's a really great point that we made this movie before all the major movie was released. And I actually didn't, it's been a few years and I did not think about that. And until Amy mentioned that, I was like, yeah, we're kind of pioneering in that regard.
So I'm curious about, when you started seeing from both of you, when you started noticing the amount of films that have been coming out with more Asian actors, directors, and writers getting more and more opportunities to showcase the films and television series that they're working on. At any point prior to the film's release, in this case, let's say before the festival run, did you guys feel that, okay, because we're seeing that trajectory change for Asian actors, Asian filmmakers, that this movie may have a shot in garnering some positive feedback, considering the way the landscape has changed a little bit for all the actors and filmmakers in the Asian community? Like, I'm curious to see how your perspective was prior to that being officially revealed to the public in that respect.
I would say for me, I'm not very linear in my thinking in that way. And so I don't think there was a conscious connection of, oh, things are increasing for Asian visibility in films and television. This will help our film. I don't think I connected it directly like that. I think maybe I'm sure like on some like a subconscious level that probably, I think I was just excited that our film was coming out and that my friends and family would be able to see it, because a lot of them don't necessarily live in New York or LA or major film festival hubs. And so they didn't have access to the film when it was in festivals. And so now it's like I could share this project that I felt so passionately about and that we worked so hard on with people that I love and respect. And so, and so also back to what you're saying about like the reception. I think my reception has also been colored because it's been mostly direct feedback that I've received has mostly been through family and friends. So thankfully they've been really supportive. I do have friends who are more critical, like in terms of like film critique, not critical as in like, negative, but so I feel it's been positive feedback, but I understand also it's impacted by the fact that there are people who care about me.
And for yourself, any differences you may have noticed for yourself prior to the film's release, in this case for the festival run that you were anticipating here?
So I was saying pioneering, that's kind of like jokingly saying that, but because that's, I guess, because of who I am. I've seen a lot of filmmakers have been making movies with Asian female leads in short film, feature film. People have been making effort even before the film was released. And then it's just, but being seen and be able to be seen on big screen, that's another thing. And I think that has to do with the entire the environment of our society. And this could be a reflection of that. And I feel that I have more auditions than before. Whether this is because of the change of the environment or the film directly, I don't know exactly, but I think maybe a mixed combination, mixed result.
Right.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, so here's what I'm curious to, if I can say on you, E, because here's something that you had said something in the past that I actually in a rather recent interview that really caught my attention, and I'm actually really curious to hear your perspective on this, Amy, because because one of the things that you had said before you is that you being born and raised in China, that there was something that you said that was really, really interesting for me, and then having you come here to this country and how your perception has changed a great deal as a result of you, where when you were in China, you were obviously the majority, and then you came into America, now you're considered the minority. But what you said very interesting for me that I thought was really unique, and I'm curious to see again, Amy, how you felt about this, is because you felt at the time when you had seen a lot of exchange students in China that at the time you didn't really think much about the struggles that they may have gone through in adjusting to the culture, adjusting to the environment, adjusting to a number of different things to get acquainted with the country. Having left and then come over here, a lot of that has changed for you along the way, where you look back and say, I wish I could have done something a little more differently to help in that regard.
Yes.
So in regards to the character you play in the movie, that's one of the things that I remember about the film that I personally took away from, where the perception that I got was that because you were alone more or less in the country, even though your husband, you are married, but there's no connection between you and your husband in the film, and you have a connection with another man who is also from China. And a lot of it, I felt like, I'm not sure, it's just my perception, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this here, that because you were isolated and you're more or less alone, and then you have a connection more or less from back home, but with another man, that you had that connection that you were longing for, but there was a piece of home that came with that as well too, with that relationship that you have with Lily Lynn's character in the movie. But what I was curious about now is that because you've had that perception about how you came into the country and then you understood that the landscape was completely different from what you were used to back at home, and then coming over here and understanding, okay, so I have to work extra harder now for me to go down this path here, which is I'm not sure if you were prepared for, or if you were prepared for it and didn't understand the overwhelming hurdles you have to overcome as a result of you being considered the minority here, and then having to use that for the character, how you have felt like you've changed as a result of that, from those personal experiences, the experiences for the character, and then since everything's been released at this point, I'm curious to see how you felt about yourself in that regard. And then, of course, Amy, I want to hear from your perspective about your relationship and working with Yi in that regard, that what you may have picked up from, maybe if you may have heard her side of the story about how that experience was like for her, that you may have taken away from that, may have changed your perception slightly different from what you have experienced growing up here yourself.
So I think now I can kind of summarize and understand myself what I was experiencing back then. But let's say like 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, I may not be able to. Like, I don't know. I just feel like different, but I wasn't able to. Let's say the first year, I might not be able to come to the summarize that, I the way that I feel is due to A, B, C, D, E.
Right.
It's that after a long time and things happen in life, and then I look back, and I realize, okay, I could have provided friendship for the people who were overseas back then when I was in China. And just like the things that I was longing for, especially the first couple of years, it was pretty tough. I just got me emotional when you mentioned loneliness, and I haven't seen my family for so many years.
Yeah.
So I think that those are all the similar emotions that I had with the character's experience.
Right.
But back then, I feel that I didn't know. I was too busy, with coping with everything that's happening in life. And especially in New York, I think we're all living in a very fast-paced lifestyle. I didn't have the time to sit there and to ruminating or contemplating what's going on and what it is and what's it about. It's only like big event happen, like I have to think, okay, do I want to make this choice? Do I want to make the other choice? And I start to think, what was it that I had experienced? And like when you ask me the question, I start to think, okay, so what is the difference? And such as like lots of difference that I feel different. Like, for example, for a long time, I felt like, people like call me Asian, and I feel this label in front of me, and I couldn't summarize it, come to the conclusion just to tell people that such changes, because I was in the majority and now I'm in the minority. So there is such change. I think now I can sort of figure out and rationalize different things happened and result different feelings that I had.
I see.
Or still have. Yeah.
Well, and if you don't mind if I jump with Amy here, because with your experience, you, Amy, growing up here, and you working in industry and understanding the setbacks that a lot of minorities experience in simply just getting auditions. And if you get an audition, it's not the one that you'd want. But when you hear this, I'm not sure if you already knew, during the production, maybe prior to the production of Yi's story, about what she was going through at the time, then she may have shared along the way that I know that everyone has their experiences that's slightly different from others, but essentially, more or less, it's kind of almost the same path that everyone has to go through a major hurdle, some bigger than others, of course. But for yourself, though, because now you have that direct connection in hearing this story, I'm wondering if you've heard about that during or prior to the production, and how you may have how your perception of Yi's story may have helped you look at something maybe differently that you probably didn't notice beforehand, because you have the more or less the American view of things, but having a direct connection with someone who you have no direct relations to, that's coming here as a foreigner, and then now you have a you're working with them in a working capacity here to be able to understand their perspective and have that infused into the character story here in some way, shape, or form, and how you feel about it's kind of a long question here. Sorry, I apologize for that, but how you felt about that journey in respect to that, how you've taken away a piece of that story that may have helped you develop a whole new sense of uh, a sense of appreciation, if that makes any sense here. So I hope the question wasn't too convoluted, but I hope you understand where I was coming from with that.
Well, so I'll tell you what I'm hearing. I wasn't aware of Yi's personal story prior to. I would say, like, honestly, the opportunity to do these interviews and like her explicitly explaining about how she had this perception of America as this very, white, essentially, I think, nation, and then coming to New York and seeing how diverse it is as a city, and like, oh, actually, this is America. And it reminded me of my personal experiences growing up in Kansas, where my brother and I were like the only Asians in our, I'm sure we were, but at the time, that's how it felt to, a 6-year-old. Only Asians in a predominantly Caucasian school. And for the longest time, it reminded me of a memory where I remember distinctly looking into a mirror and questioning, like, why do people think I'm Asian? Because my best friend Jenny likes chicken nuggets. I like chicken nuggets. My best friend Jenny goes swimming. I go swimming. We do and like the same things. So, like, I'm American. So why do people think I'm Asian? Because that, as a child, that was what consummated American to me. What constituted American to me was liking and doing and living the culture as an American, right?
Right.
And it wasn't, for better or for worse, I think I lived a very sheltered childhood, and it wasn't until I got to college that I kind of was exposed to more diversity and really had an opportunity to explore not only my own Asian background, but also like other cultures and backgrounds. So it just, Yi's story reminded me how no matter what our background, what our upbringing, ultimately people just want to try to find a human connection, right? And so on some level, I think that there's a scene where Amy and Angel meet in the hallway, and I think even though they're strangers, they only briefly interacted prior in a work environment. Like Amy still reaches out. She senses something in Angel that is also seeking, that she recognizes, and I think that this is ultimately like what one of the main themes of the film is. Just we're all seeking human connection and wanting to recognize ourselves and others in some way.
I agree with you on that. Here's the thing that I'm really curious about, to see both of your perspective on this here. And I'm going to ask you, Amy, to answer this one first here, because it's funny that you actually mentioned that scene in the hall, because I was just thinking about that too, with both of your characters' interaction. But the thing that I found rather unique about that is because one of the things that, and I hope you guys don't mind me delving into it, but one of the things that I remember that crossed my mind in the movie was that because your character, Amy, in the film is going through some personal struggles, but there's no any ill intention or any ill will or anything that showcases that your character had some sort of animosity within the culture. It's a pretty, you have a pretty I would say a pretty cordial relationship from what I can gather. I mean, there's some differences you've had, but despite that, you still respect your family, you still respect the culture. And but as a result of that, I noticed that in that particular scene, that because you've had that upbringing where more or less the culture you've had growing up had a lot of positivity in your life, which therefore reflects in how you are willing to help out others, in the community. I'm sure if it was a different person, it would be the exact same thing too, for you to be able to help the characters as well. But what I found to be really interesting about that, and this is where I wanted to see your perspective on it here too, is because one of the biggest things that I wasn't sure if the film was going to delve into here, and I kind of think it sort of did to some degree, but not entirely with Nikki's character. But I feel like that's a side of the story that we don't get to see too often, even if it's albeit a small portion of the film where you have more or less your fellow man wanted to help each other out, not caring about the culture back, but just caring about the individual person. So I'm hoping that if anyone comes across that movie, it comes across this film and sees that scene, that they take away from how important it is just to give a lending hand. Yes, it is within the context of the Asian culture, or in this case, the Chinese culture here, but the fact that that scene, to me, I took away a lot from that moment from the movie because it showcases the kindness that your character had, and despite the differences with each story, there it was very helpful, in my opinion, to showcase that it doesn't matter that you are a foreigner. I'm here to help you out. That's kind of more or less what I've taken away from here. It's kind of a long rant when I'm going off here, but I wanted to know from your perspective on that, where if at any point was there any talks about showcasing a side of the story where there is a difference between how certain characters look within the culture that may have some issues with it, that may have been kind of like a talking point where you guys had discussed maybe we should kind of remove this or possibly add this in there, have your character do something that may be where she's conflicted about what she's going through, and as a result that may have some resentment towards the culture. I'm not sure if that's something that came along the way in the discussion about how certain people in their respective culture, they may have some sort of resentment towards that was possibly talked into adding into the story. Again, I hope that's not a long question, but I hope you understand where I'm coming from with that.
I think I do, but I don't know that that ever came up in discussions about the character. It's possible. Yeah, I don't know that it was. I mean, it wasn't in the script, and it
Okay.
didn't really. It wasn't really explored. But I'm intrigued by your like questioning of that, and it's an interesting exploration.
Hmm.
I don't know, Yi, did you have any of those experiences or any instances of that?
Not really.
Uh,
It was in the script, and I think it was natural, right? Yeah, we
Do you
worked together.
do you
Worked.
both do you both have like because here's what I'm always curious about, because the story is essentially it's a universal story. You could tell it through any culture, and I think anyone can relate to that. I certainly felt that way too, because here's the thing: I felt that what Amy's story, Angel's story, and Nikki's story, in some way, shape, or form, I've connected with what the journeys they go through, because a lot of things that each of these characters go through, in some way, shape, or form, I've experienced that to a degree. And the thing is that what I found to be rather compelling from each of you guys' performances in each of these stories is that how you guys handle the situations for you. And I think the reason why I was trying to bring up the side of the resentment, because I know for a fact, for me growing up as a kid, like one of the things that I remember, because I'm talking about your character specifically, Amy, is that I remember specifically when your parents are talking to you in Chinese, you respond back in English. And I remember as a kid growing up, me growing up speaking Spanish, and then want to respond back in English because, and for myself, a lot of my friends were speaking English, and I had somewhat of a resentment there. That's the reason why I brought it up about your character. I was bringing it about your character because I wasn't sure if that was intentional, and having that your character speaks English, because there might be a disconnect to some degree of how you were feeling about the way your parents are insisting on get a boyfriend, like, get a husband, and there's that disconnect in that respect. But you still very much care for them, but there's a sense of like stress that comes with it as well too. So those are the observations I was making there. But I forgot the question I was going to ask because I'm thinking too much here. But the point I'm getting at is that I think I was trying to get here is that I was curious about how you personally felt about that side of the character, and the parents are responding or talking to you in Chinese, and then you're responding back in English. If that was a conscious choice for you to do that for the character, or at least for everyone involved to have the character be that way in responding back in English, and then the parents are still responding back in Chinese, or if that was important to have some sort of like middle alternative motive about why they're not responding back in Chinese rather than instead of just instead of sticking with speaking English to the parents, but have some connection. But there's that's that same disconnect at the same time. Convoluted, but I hope you understand where I'm coming from.
I think, well, so the character was written that way. The dialogue was written where Amy's mom speaks to her in Mandarin, and then she responds in English. And I think ultimately, I don't want to speak for Mandy, our director and the co-writer for the script, but I think that was just a very authentic portrayal of a lot of ABC, American-born Chinese uh, um, people who were born here of a certain time. I think it's changed generationally, but I'll say personally, in my experience, even though I was born in another country, we came to the US when I was very young, and I grew up speaking English. My parents wanted me to speak primarily English, and
Right.
even though at home they spoke to me in Mandarin and Taiwanese, I still responded in English. So I think it was just a very of that generation. It was a very authentic portrayal, and I think that's why, if there was some subconscious potential resentment, it wasn't written in the character, and I didn't explore it in that way, but I kind of wish I
Okay.
had now, because that's a really interesting way to approach it.
Well, I guess because a lot of it, because in some ways I kind of projected myself into that, because there was moments of, I remember thinking, well, I wonder if there's any resentment with the character towards, my family have done this to me. I'm tired of it. I want to be able to do my thing. And so there's a little bit of that I kind of sensed for myself towards that there. So again, a little projection on my end, but again, that's just from how I felt like maybe that was my exploration of the character at the time when I was watching the films, and how it may have been perceived that way. But yes, I do agree at 100%. I've had friends of mine who are Hispanic that don't speak a word of Spanish, but they understand everything because their parents just happen to raise their kids that way, considering with what they felt was appropriate at the time when they were raising their children. I myself, although I can speak it, I don't speak to my kid in Spanish. I talk to him all in English, and he understands a few things. So I do agree that there is a lot of authenticity behind that. But again, it's all from my perspective, how I felt the character's journey was. But in your case, the one thing I wanted to ask you about your particular character's journey, that I was curious to see how you felt about yourself in respects to coming into America here. Because I don't know if when you first came into the country, because I don't remember in details if you had shared that you were coming here on your own and having to explore, the country. I think you mentioned before you had some friends here, but what I'm referring to is that there is no family here, if I recall correctly, that you just showed up here in the country just because your friends had been out here, and then you wanted to be able to explore. Because you mentioned before that after your father had passed away, that he had encouraged you to explore what your passion is here, and then you wanted to pursue acting. Therefore, you came to America, and I think you've been here for about 10 years, if I heard correctly.
Yes.
But when you first came here, though, I was really curious about the sense of like. I'm not sure if you were overwhelmed with the landscape of the country, that you felt like, wow, this is amazing, or were you a little nervous along the way, that it took you a while to get acclimated to the environment, if you will, on how you felt that for yourself, if you were prepared for the adjustments that they were coming with, you having to get used to certain things that you were obviously not exposed to before in China. Now you're here, and I'm wondering if some things that you've experienced for yourself was it hard in the beginning, and then you developed the callus to be able to push through that, or was it a rather easy transition for you to come out here and then realize that, it's not too bad, but then once you started going through the audition process for you to get certain roles, that's where you may have experienced a lot of the setbacks that you started experiencing more directly than you did when you first came to the country. So I hope the question makes sense for you with what I was trying to refer to here.
Yeah, yeah. So the reason that I came to the US and New York, it was kind of random. So my dad he encouraged me to go out, but it doesn't matter to him where, because for him, his goal is for me to see the world, no matter where. And I didn't know where to go because he already passed away. And at the time, I was in Shanghai, and I had friends who visited New York before, and they liked it. So, and I thought, okay, New York, I've never been. US, I've never been. When I was younger, I traveled in Europe with my family. So I thought that I have been, but I don't think I've experienced
Well traveled, yeah.
forest. Yeah, but versus America that I've never seen. So I think, okay, I'll go to New York. That's how I made the decision.
Okay.
And it wasn't really for pursuing acting. And my
Okay.
dad actually
Okay.
didn't know that I was pursuing acting.
Got it. Okay.
And then, yeah, he had no idea. And then it was before that I was living in Shanghai. So in terms of the lifestyle, it's very modern in the city. It's very big and skyscrapers everywhere.
Right.
So I wasn't scared or feel strange about the city view or the city lifestyle. However, there is a lot of difficulties. For example, English is like number one. I couldn't understand, I couldn't speak much. And I never spoke English when I was in China. I learned some basic grammar, some vocabulary in college and enough to pass exam. But again, I don't really hear them enough and I don't speak enough. And it was pretty overwhelming in that regards. And then I came to New York, and actually a lot of people are immigrants and people speak English with an accent, which is very different than the tape that I used to listen to study English with. Right. And it's from textbook and it's very slow pace, very so clear. Those are the tapes like for a TOEFL exam and so on. And I had trouble there. So I got lost all the time on the subway. In our subway system. We can change lines and I just could never understood where I'm going.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I know.
So that was difficult. And all the stuff, like for example, nail clippers. I didn't know where to buy nail clippers in America. Because things are in different categories.
Right.
Yeah, and so I had trouble there as well. And then order food. The thing is, I really love enjoying different cuisines. The thing is, I have to, another thing that I didn't learn in China is the name of the food and the vegetables, the name of the vegetables, for example, asparagus. I didn't know I needed vegetables and I so wanted to eat vegetables. And I was sitting in a restaurant, I have to look up the words. Right. And that was the first week. And I saw other people order asparagus on their table. So I tell the waiter, I said, what is that? And I want that. And would you please spell it in my notebook so that I can look it up? Yeah, that's how that's the first week. That was very tough. And of course, later I started to, make a lot of effort on that regards and start to read and write down the words that I don't know from one article and make sure that I do this every day. It's a learning process, and also pick up the very colloquial expressions and culturally, and that's how I experience the difference, like how language connects to our thoughts. And it was very interesting. Like later on, I learned more subjects, for example, about share market, finances, and that was in English. So one day I was on YouTube and came across this page. It's someone talk about share market in Chinese, and I couldn't understand because I learned all those terms. Those terms has this very specific meaning. It's kind of a lingual in that field, and they don't translate that direct, let's say option trading. And I was like, what is it? I realized, wow, this language, in Chinese, in this topic is so strange to me. So I realized, wow. And also culture would influence our language, big deal. Many modern terms, especially younger generation, how they talk on online is kind of different as well. And occasionally when I chat with them, I would come up there would come up words that I didn't know. And I thought that was interesting. Yeah.
Well, okay. So here's what I'm actually curious about something with the both of you now, because I'm really curious about how for each of you, when it comes to when you guys were making the movie, the thing that I've picked up from the both of you is that this was a fairly easy project to work on for a number of different reasons. Everyone understood the value of the story you're telling here and how important it is to share the story and developing characters that the audience can connect with here, and hopefully and can also respond to as well too. I'm sure from previous experience you've had in other productions or other auditions you've had gone through where, maybe it have not been as pleasant for a different variety of different reasons. But having this experience for yourselves, I'm not sure if there's anything you have both have taken away from with, the things that led up to the production, what you guys experienced from the production that you have taken away from that you've been able to use, and let's say for the next set of auditions you're going to be working on, getting here, I meant to say, and then the other next set of productions that you are now officially signed on to be able to take on here, that you may felt like from working on in a New York Minute has influenced you to some way or shape or form to be able to approach things a little bit more differently now because everyone understood the importance of telling a good story despite the background, but obviously the Asian culture in America here can be kind of looked as one lumps, a big umbrella here as one thing, but in reality, it's a lot more. There's a lot more differences that are cultures out there. I think most people tend to bundle up and not understand that there's different variations of the cultures that it's really important to tell to understand the person's perspective from those respective backgrounds. I know I'm kind of going off here in a tangent, but I hope that you understand what I was referring to here. But coming off of that, do you both feel that there is some sort of lesson or influence you have taken from your experience on the set, working with everybody here, that have made you look at things more differently for yourselves, and then with the next set of projects you're potentially going to be working on, next set of auditions, and so on and so forth here? So hope it's not too long, but I hope you understand what I'm referring to here.
My experience is more in the acting regards. I remember when we were filming and it was very cold and it was December, November, that time and in New York. And one scene was, I think we shot at 1 a.m. perhaps on the bridge, and it was cold, and I was wearing a thin dress and very thin coat. And the character was very emotional at the moment. It was a bridge scene, and this scene always has made me emotional, and I didn't need to like trigger or whatsoever like much about it. And then I was so cold, and I realized this physical challenge could distract me from my concentration. And I realized, wow, so that's when I guess preparation comes in really significantly, that I have, I mean, it would help with this kind of distraction. Normally wearing mic, like we would be aware of, and normally a little colder or hotter, we can all overcome. And then I realized, okay, so there are situations that is physically really challenging, and I should learn how to focus in that kind of condition. That's one thing I learned through that process. Yeah,
it's interesting. I like that one here. And what about for yourself, Amy?
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a great one, Yi. For me, also, I would say it's an acting one, but actually going back to the audition process, I remember just feeling really connected to the character of Amy Chen, and then going in and being comfortable with playing her, meaning I was focused on her story. I was focused on who she was as an individual. And so that allowed me the freedom to play and explore when Mandy gave me a note to try something different. A lot of times in the past, I would say, and still currently every once in a while, when I audition, I get caught up in the words. I get caught up in things that I think detract from my ability to play, to perform. And so I really appreciated the level of trust I had in myself in this character. And it's a good reminder that ultimately you want to tell the character's story, and you want to, if I can focus on that, and if I can focus on just being in character, then I won't let other things distract me from an audition, from a performance. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to say is that I need to bulk up on my show tunes because Celia, who plays Nina, the third story in the New York Minute, she and Roger apparently would sing show tunes in between takes.
Oh,
And
yeah, I heard about
I'm
that.
so
Yeah.
jealous of that. Disney songs, actually, and I know a few. So, and that seemed to be a source of great enjoyment for everybody on set. And I love Disney songs. And so I just need to learn the words better so that I can actually break out in song in between to kind of, you know.
So is that so? When you're saying that, are you saying it to kind of like alleviate maybe some potential stress that you may have gone through, to in preparation for the part, to kind of help yourself relax and enjoy the moment more? Is that kind of the reason why you're referring to that?
Yes,
Oh, okay,
exactly. Thank
interesting.
you.
I find that to be rather interesting. That's really unique. That's really beautiful there. Well, so here's what I wanted to delve into with the both of you here is because for me, what's really important when it comes to storytelling is telling a great story, despite who the characters are. Obviously the story has to make sense, and the people who are going to be involved have to do the story justice. So you get the right actor for the part, and so on. I feel like for me personally, when I watch a movie, say for example, like in a New York Minute, the story is really what is, and people that are involved are really what are going to help sell it here. That's going to hopefully connect with everybody. From your perspective, for the both of you here, I'm curious to see if you feel that because the way things have changed now, where again there are more opportunities and there's a lot less. I wouldn't say a lot less, but maybe there are some consideration where before, if you were brought in, we need you to play Asian character one and say these lines, and then kind of be not necessarily dismissive, maybe they were, but to have just to be kind of like ignorant to the fact that you want something more out of the character rather than Asian waiter one and so on. But now that you had experience working in the industry for a while here, do you notice a change of how things have gotten better? Where now that you go through an audition process, when you're going through a meeting now, talking with filmmakers and producers and so on, that you feel like that, okay, I can see the trajectory change for not just for myself, but for everyone, where the skin color, the culture isn't necessarily the forefront, but rather the actor and the writer and the director are here to tell a really good story, and they want to bring the right people involved in the project to tell a good story despite their background. So I'm curious to see from your both of your perspective if you feel like it's starting to change in that regard from your experience here so far.
I remember a long time ago, I'm talking about maybe like 5 years ago, I had this conversation with a writer friend, and he said, I'm paraphrasing, oh, I'd like to have you in my script, but I have to find a reason for you to be in it. And okay, that's one. And conversation continues and life goes on. And I actually got an audition the other day, and it's saying they're casting a role, and they didn't, they said open to any ethnicity and doesn't have to be any specific race or even gender. And then I was reading like the sign, like, yeah, it doesn't have to be, this story is not necessarily for any race or gender specific. And then I felt very happy, and it reminds me of the conversation that I had years ago with this friend. Do I have to justify why I'm here in a story just because of my race, or just because I'm a recent immigrant? Do I have to like tell the audience this is why I'm here? Otherwise, it's not legit. Yeah, that's my feeling. And I feel with the auditions that I'm getting today, I feel it's more and more reasonable and very open. And I feel like, okay, this is more modern. I feel in a way like up to date.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. And for yourself, Amy, any differences that you may notice for yourself?
Right. I'll share two things. One is that I feel I've been very fortunate in that a lot of the past projects I've worked on, I have been cast in roles where it was not specifically written for someone Asian. And actually in a project that I was cast in recently, where they told me originally that the character wasn't written for a man, and they changed it because they saw my audition. And so that was very encouraging to
Nice.
hear
Congrats
as an
on that.
actor that they appreciated my performance and enough to be willing to change the character from their script. The other thing I would say is that I've noticed more sensitivity over the past a couple of years with audition breakdowns, where there was one that I received recently where they said that the character is written to be Asian, but the notes said that if you feel comfortable doing an accent, you can, but you please don't feel that you have to. And before, I think there are certain ways that things might be presented where it didn't seem like there was a choice. It was kind of expected in certain castings. And so now it just seems like it's more open to nuance and just being sensitive to how actors might perceive something and just trying to be aware.
I see. Okay. But overall though, I mean, with the way things are going right now, in terms of, you know, the amount of work that's being presented here, because of the awareness of people being considerate of the person's background here, but not being the forefront here. But do you feel that it's still, the industry's still getting its footing on that, or is the way things are going, do you think in time it will change in a manner that will be reasonable for these changes to make it more of a normalcy, rather than like, and you know, it's going to take a couple more years before the next set of people who are now running the industry have a better understanding about, it's not about the race anymore, it's about the characters, it's about the actors that are right for the part. Do you feel like that's going to change somewhat in a quick turnaround time, or do you feel like it's going to take a lot of time to get to that point where none of that's going to be an issue for anyone anymore involved with projects they may want to work on?
I'd like to say something on that.
Okay.
Also because years ago I was in a web series. It's called Mandarin Avenue, and people are from all over the place. And you know, the show is about like immigrant story as well, but not necessarily. But people may speak very perfect American English or British English, and like with people all over the world. I want to say that I feel we will see more of these when there are a lot of people are doing like traveling around and making films. I think it has to do with political situation with different countries as well. If travel is so difficult, there won't be many people traveling and having a life in a different nation than where they were born. And then there will not be, consequently, there won't be as many, like more work about or reflects such lifestyle. And when after airplane is invented, I guess people travel more and more often, and we're more and more connected with like internet, with TV shows being distributed to different places, and people get to know each other, or like know each other in a way more and more. So our lifestyle became different than decades ago. Like the amount of people who study overseas or have experience of studying overseas compared to 50 years ago, that's drastic different, the number. So therefore we have more films talk about this people in this situation or have such experience, and it's getting more and more related to broader audiences. And I feel when this change is continuing and or going to one direction than the other, it will subconsciously and I want to say consequently affect what we are seeing on film and television.
Yeah,
that's a great point about the global community and the internet being probably two of the biggest drivers of why there's more diverse, inclusive material projects being made. And so to go back to your question, Rob, the optimist in me hopes that this trend will continue, that we will continue to have people who are the decision makers champion for more diverse stories across the board. But, you know, when we say the industry, it's multi-layered and
I know.
I can't think of the word, but I'm making it with my hand. You know, so I think it's pockets that happen, and it's fits and starts. And so we might make some progress and then have to fall back a bit and make more progress. But ultimately, if we're going in the right direction, then that's a good thing, and hopefully we continue with that. But in terms of like the amount of time it'll take, I don't know that anybody can answer that.
Yeah. I know it's kind of an unfair, it's kind of a question that may not have a direct answer, but I was curious to see from your perspective on that here. But listen, I want to give you both a lot of, as Patrick would say here, give you guys your flowers for what you guys have done with the film, and also with what you guys are continuing on here, because the film industry is not for the weak of heart, as maybe we may not realize, but I'm sure a lot of people do. It's a very difficult path, and it's a very difficult path when you have a certain amount of hurdles that you have to overcome because of your background and the way you look, that I think a lot of people do take for granted, that they don't realize the struggles that come with that. And so for both of you to be able to come at a point where the landscape has changed, and I'm sure you guys experienced to some degree before all that had come through, that you're still pursuing the passion here. And that to me speaks a lot of volumes about the two of you, that despite the hurdles, you're still very much passionate about this art form and you want to pursue that here. And things are looking for the better, in my opinion, how I see it here. So I really do want to give you guys both your props in that respect in doing that here. But at the same time, I also want to say that, because you guys have made a film that I really believe that there's a lot that people can connect with here. And it doesn't matter what your background is here. As I mentioned before, I think you can be of a Polish background, African-American background, Hispanic background, and watch the film. And there's every bit of that story that anyone can take from that they can connect with here. The only difference is that the culture is different. That's the major difference there, but anyone can watch the movie. And I think it speaks a lot of volumes when you get films like My Big Fat Greek Wedding, The Joy Luck Club, Crazy Rich Asians, where it has a major cultural impact. And I'm wondering why we're not seeing a lot more of these type of stories, because it's always far in between when they happen. So, I'm glad that we're seeing more stories of this sort here from a different angle, of course, where some of them may be considered more comedy. This one's a little more grounded, in my opinion, which I think we need to see a lot more of that in that respect. So I hope that in time, people will take a look at this film and give you guys your respects and understand the purpose of telling the story, which is really, really important, that hopefully will affect everybody in a positive light as well, too. So I know I long one again, but I do want to give you guys your props in that respect here. But is there anything that you guys are able to kind of more or less share here about what people can be expecting down the line that you are able to shine a light on, that they can be expecting to check out for any future projects you will be working on here or expected to be coming out in the near future?
I just had a short film that I did recently, and it's premiered in film festivals right now. It just premiered yesterday, and then it's the beginning of its film festival run. So I'll post about it on my social media. If you guys are interested, you can follow me and check out more information. It's called Removable. Yeah.
Got it. I was going to ask you what the name of the film here is. And for yourself, Amy, anything particular that you are able to announce here for anyone who may be watching and want to follow through with you?
Yes, and then also I just wanted to say thank you, Rob, for those flowers. I really appreciate support, and I also want to just highlight. I definitely wouldn't be able to do what I do without the love and support of family and friends. I mean, this is, like you said, this is not an easy road to travel, and it's not for the faint of heart or for someone alone. You really need like a community and a network of support. So anyone else who wants to pursue acting, just keep that in mind. And in terms of projects, yes. So one of my best friends, Janine Flynn, and her husband, Adam Charleston, have a production company called Cleomark Productions, and we've done a couple of projects together, Customer 935 and Emma the Z. And the project that I'm going to be in that will be coming out on IFT TV is called The Sleeper Awakens, and I play a magical character. I'll say it.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure to have everything available from the links down below for everyone to look into, to follow you both on your social media accounts here. But otherwise, again, for the camera, I want to say thank you both so much for giving your time here, and I wish you nothing but great success in your future endeavors here. So until next time, cheers.
Thank you very much.